Jeremy Cowart is an award-winning photographer. He's shot for Taylor Swift, Carrie Underwood, even President Barack Obama, and Pope Francis. But I think one of the things that he would say he's most proud of is his humanitarian work. Thanks for joining us today, Jeremy.
Of course, Maggie. It's so good to be here with you.
Okay, so your story we were just sharing is, I think, such an incredible story for parents to hear of how your parents were just great encouragers and affirming to you growing up. Tell us about your childhood.
Yeah, my childhood was pretty normal childhood, except that I was very creative as a kid, and I didn't think I could do much. So I didn't excel at academics. I didn't excel at piano lessons or whatever. And so I'd always tell my dad, like, I can't do that. I'm just not capable. And so he would always encourage me with a Bible verse, Philippians 4:13, just encourage me that you can do this through Christ who strengthens you. And I heard that for a long time. And so my whole life has been about overcoming, thanks to my dad and my childhood. But yeah, as a kid, I didn't understand why the other kids could take notes really well and I couldn't, because I couldn't listen. I was daydreaming and thinking about other things, And so, yeah, my childhood was a fun childhood, a healthy childhood, but just had a lot of, intellectual, not disabilities, but just didn't succeed or excel at anything like the other kids were.
And I think that's a great testament to, parents as well, your parents, who, sometimes we get so stuck in the academics that we don't realize that our children might have giftings in other areas like art, like the creative. And that's what your parents found, is that you really did well in art and the creative and really just flourished in that area.
Yeah, the traditional school system isn't really set up for creative kids, And so thankfully I do come from a creative family. We were always involved in music and anything creative in the arts. And so yeah, in 7th grade I discovered I could draw, and so that's when they really sunk their teeth in and bought me art supplies and camera and as much as they could to encourage my creative abilities, and it really helped. Those are some of my favorite memories, is just getting new things, new tools to create.
And then as you got older, again, just the struggle of, I can't do it, but your mom continued to remind you that you can do all things. And she was the one that kind of pushed you towards graphic design. Tell me about this.
Yeah, I wanted to be a painter for the rest of my life. I wanted to be a fine artist, and my parents made a just really wise call, and they said, you should look into computers. 1995, it was still a pretty rare thing to buy a Macintosh computer.
Yeah.
They weren't as popular as they are now, over 20 years ago. And so I'll never forget her bringing in the box of the Mac and saying, you should look into this and look into this thing called Photoshop. And I was terrified because computers seemed like they were just for really smart people, and I didn't think of myself as smart. And so, but the minute, I took my first graphic design class in college and I learned what a computer can do, I was hooked, and I've been hooked ever since then. I use Photoshop to this day, every day. I used it this morning. So yeah, it's a part of my life.
And what was it about graphic design that really grabbed you, and did it help your self-esteem at all?
It did, because I learned that if your passion is involved in your tools, if you can use your tools to enhance what you do, then you'll do anything to learn, So my curiosity, my creativity forced me to learn the computer, because once I saw what Photoshop can do, I was like, oh man, game over. I can do all kinds of weird, crazy stuff, with the computer. And then of course you learn all the other things that go into day-to-day business management and all kinds of other things. Just learning a computer in general was such a huge step for me to overcome the thinking that, it's not that I was stupid, it's just that I didn't care about those subjects. And once I found something that I care about, then I'm willing to learn all the, smart, detailed, technical stuff.
And then you got a great job at an ad agency, a successful ad agency. But I love your story about meeting one of your idols was it a coffee shop or a restaurant?
Yeah.
And being challenged that maybe there was a different route for you to take.
Yeah.
Tell the story.
Yeah, I had this kind of hero in town named Jimmy Abeg. He was a painter. He is a painter, musician, just kind of a local legend. And I saw him in a coffee shop once and just went up to him and introduced myself. And thankfully he took me under his wing and started mentoring me. And I'll never forget him saying, "You should quit your job tomorrow and start your own company." I was like, oh my gosh, that's a crazy thought. But I had been wanting to quit, and I knew he was right. And so I went home that night and told my wife, I was like, I'm going to quit tomorrow, and I'm going to start my own company. And I did. I literally quit the next day. And I've worked for myself ever since, and that was over 20 years ago. And then a few months later, he said, you should buy this new thing called a digital camera. I was like, what? You can take a picture and it goes into your computer? It's such a foreign thought, and we're really starting to sound old talking about the first digital camera. But it was a pretty game-changing tool to skip from film to digital. And so anyway, once I did that, I fell in love with photography. And so Jimmy was a huge influence in my life.
And one part that you're skirting over, Jeremy, is the fact that you failed one of your photography classes in college.
Yes. Yeah, I took just one semester of photography in college because I was studying graphic design, and you had to take a photography class. And at that point, I had no interest in photography. And so I took the class, and I made a D, nearly failed the class. And so I was like, yep, that sums that up. I'll never be a photographer if I can't even pass a photography class.
Never say never, right?
Yeah, and that seemed really daunting as well because, shutter speeds and aperture and ISO white balance, all that stuff was just really Greek to me, and they might as well have been speaking another language. And so, but again, a digital camera a few years later helped ease me into the world of the photography language. And of course now it's like riding a bike, and I do it every day. So I think people really have to know that, yes, something can seem daunting, but once you jump in, learn the language, and then it's really easy after that.
And a big testament to your wife, who back then was your girlfriend in college, because she really believed in you as well. So you had these super supportive parents, but also a super supportive partner who said, Jeremy, I know that you can do this.
Yeah, she's always really supported me. Of course, there has to be a level of reality. She was working as a physical therapist at the time, and so it made sense. She was getting health benefits, all that stuff, insurance, and so we could afford it with no kids at the time for me to jump and try to do this new thing. If she wasn't working, I don't know that we would have been able to do that. But at the time, it was doable for me to quit my job and just go out and try my own thing. And so, but still, even then, a lot of spouses maybe would have been too nervous to support that. And so, yeah, she has always been very supportive. And then years later, when I had a successful design company, I wanted to shut that down to become a photographer, which was also another big jump. And she supported that as well.
So as you look back at your life, and you've alluded to just changing and doing different things over the years, what would you say to parents or maybe even kids watching who, again, struggle with, I can't?
I think especially in the church, in the Christian world, we hear that verse all the time. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And we tend to, that applies to other people, but not me. No, really, I can't. And I think if you really sit down to hear the story of any athlete or celebrity or whoever, musician, you'll hear their story of they were also just a normal child, with so much going against them. You just have to, the biggest thing for everybody is you just, the subtitle of my book is Jumping into Fear. You almost have to celebrate the fear, know that it's normal, know that it's not going away. You don't defeat fear. Every morning you wake up, it's going to be there again. So to accept that it's just a part of the process. But defeating that thing, there's a book I keep reading called The War of Art. And it's all about the resistance that keeps us from doing the things we're most meant to do. And you just have to keep jumping into it and know that it's going to be scary, but God's got you. And even if you fail, that's okay. You know, like you're still gonna learn a ton from the failure. You're gonna learn a lot about yourself just from the fact that you did jump, you did try it. And one more thing we talk about in the book is that if you say no, if you give up to the first idea, you don't know this, but you might be giving up to idea 20. Because what I've learned is that ideas lead to ideas, lead to ideas, and the bigger they get. And so if you surrender and shut down to that first one, you could be surrendering to a life of possibility. And so it's super important, especially with the early ideas, to just try them, see what happens.
That's good. Thank you so much for your time, Gerald.
Of course, thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.